Hi, my name is Mark Brown with PonyBoy Pop Art. Today we're going to walk through how to paint the Hulk by Nacho Busto. This model is available on his CG Trader page at Ignacio Busto, and I'll link that here. And I'm going to walk through how to paint it up and how I got it to look like this. So follow along and keep watching. Okay, so now that we've got him all cleaned up and I've scoured off any of the zits that were left over, what we're going to do is get him assembled, glued together, and then cure him. The reason on this is I haven't tested this with this Accelerator resin yet, but with the Elegoo Mars resin, it has quite a bit of shrinkage in curing, and it can vary between your parts. So what I like to do is glue it together, then cure it, and at that point, as it's curing, it's really going to weld and shape together and really become more of an adhesive single piece. So what I like is grabbing a little super glue, putting in, we want to fill in some of the holes that we had before. Not a whole lot needed, but enough to get this on. And mount him up, get him lined up. Now I noticed I don't have a perfect connection here. It's got a little bit of a wobble. That's okay. We'll be filling it in with some putty in a little bit. But for now, I want to get this locked in place. So I'm going to take some accelerant and drop it on here, and our model is mostly. Alright, Hulk is now cleaned up and has been glued together, and I've cured him. You will see if there's some gap lines here. That's not to worry about, but it's pretty common with the parts. They do shrink down just a little bit differently when they print out, and so unfortunately it's just never going to be perfect, or if it is, you got very lucky. But all good. So what we're going to do is take some handy dandy modeling paste and a paintbrush and get some water here to be able to wet it down afterwards. You'll see as I go along. And I'm just going to take some paste here, and I like to start on the back and just start filling in the gap there, and literally just kind of smudge it in at the beginning, and don't worry about how thick it gets at first, because that's where the water's going to come in, but we do want to get that gap filled completely. So we're just going to keep painting that in until the gap disappears. Really push it in there. And once you got that the way you want it, what you do is dip it into your paintbrush into some water here and simply paint back over, and what you notice is that it thins right out and starts to brush away. And once you've got that, take a paper towel and simply wipe down the area. Don't worry about if you've got discoloration. We're going to prime over that. You want to make sure you filled in all the gaps, but not left so much that you've covered up any details. Again, if you do, just wet down your brush some more, wipe any excess off, and then brush the bits that you don't want on the model off. I'm going to continue this around here, do it again up here, and on this model those were the only gap lines. So I'm going to just verify that it fits in here well. There we go. Yep, it's going to be great. Alright, it is decently slopped on here, but again, don't worry about that. The big thing is I want to be able to look it over and say, no, I do not see any of the crack lines. Now I'm going to just get my brush wet, start painting over some of these areas, and you'll see that it gets, I hope I'm getting this in the right angle, you see that it really froths up once you've got a wet brush on there. So you just take that and then wipe it down, and that area cleans up really nice. And so you just keep doing that over and over again. You know, rinse your brush off here on the paper towel, and then start wiping away the excess. And what you'll get is a nice fine bit where the putty is still inside the crease line, but we're not losing anything and able to get something that can be primed up really smooth and nice. That's all that counts. So I'm going to just keep doing that around here again, and we'll check back in a few. Okay, at this point I have washed off all the excess, or most of the excess. I've still got some back here to clean up. Again, you do want to use your brush and get any of this white that you don't want left and dried painted off and then wiped off. If you leave it to dry, trust me, you're going to get some results that you don't like, and then you're going to have to sand those off, and you know, it's really, you're trying not to have to do that if you can help it. Don't mind if you end up wiping some of your paste off that you've just painted on. That's going to happen sometimes, but also you may be end up going over and doing 2 coats on this. So like for instance, the front here, I see the seam is nicely filled in, and this is going to dry up very well. Same with the right arm. The left arm, I can still see a gap right here, and same on his back, I can still see a gap. So I'm going to let that dry, and we will either come back and do a little more of the modeling paste on here, or I'll grab some of the 2-part modeling putty and we'll just fill in the gaps on that. And then once we cover it with primer, then we'll not be able to see any of that, and that's the whole point. So we're going to check back later. So he's had a chance to dry here, and I've still got a couple of these lines like right here that just didn't really meet up perfectly, and I had tried a little of the modeling paste. That still didn't quite fill it in enough. So what I've got now is some of the 2-part sculpting epoxy, and just grab a little tiny bit of each of those, roll it up into a ball, squish it all together. It starts out white and a dark gray, and as you mix it up together and smooth it, it becomes kind of this uniform gray. Then you just take it in a like silly putty or Play-Doh or anything like that, roll it up, and then take little bits as you need and just kind of put them into place. So I'm going to take this little wormish bit that I've got here, and there we go. Just lay it down into there. And now I'm going to take the back of this paintbrush here and just squish it into place. And then once I've got it how I want it, once again I'm going to just take a little bit of wet paintbrush. It's still a little damp from doing this before. I probably need to wet it up some more. And paint it down, and the water will help wash it off. So let's grab a little more water here. And just paint that down a little bit. Excess comes off. And the rest paints and washes into place. And there we go. Crack has disappeared, and we've just got a solid muscle mass that's coming around there, but we haven't lost any of the definition of the lines of his muscles, which is perfect. So I'm going to take a little bit more, squeeze it into the back here. Hi, baby. And continue around. All right, at this point we've got everything's dried up, and I'm going to go ahead and give it its first coat of primer and see how it looks. And if you'll notice, the areas that were white and joined right here completely disappeared. You can't even tell. This is going to look great. Alright, I'm going to keep going and just finish wrapping this up. So we've got Hulk all finished up here, and what we want to do now is get the first base coat of basically getting as much color on him as we can, so we can start to see what he's really going to look like. And with that, we're going to use some just a plain old acrylic, and I just grabbed a shade of green that looks pretty good for base color for him. We are going to darken that up as we start to dirty it up when we get to the weathering part, but right now we're going to start with this and just start on his back, just to pick a nice spot that we can test on. And oh yeah, that is some Hulk green for sure. So we'll just keep on going with that. And this is a drain hole that we had for the resin, and unfortunately I thought I'd plugged that up well enough with some super glue, so I will have to come back over and get that again, but in the meantime I'm just going to keep painting. So I think you're getting the idea. We're just going to keep going on this for all the rest of his body, and I don't need to bore you with all that, so we will check back in a few minutes. One thing I did want to point out is you will notice the top quality components that I use. When it comes to palettes, I try to use the free ones that I get whenever I order takeout, and they give me a nice hard duty or heavy duty cardboard or light plastic. It's nice just because it won't soak up the acrylics, and that doesn't cost anything at all to get the palette, so that's nice. I just wanted to take a pause here and show you how I'm coming along. I'm just basically kind of throwing the green acrylic paint on here however I can, and wherever I can, just making sure that I get it all covered. Not really looking for any advanced style or technique here, just basically get rid of the gray. Obviously leaving the areas that, like his hair and his pants, and we'll be coming back to those. But I also did want to take a moment again to give a big shout out to Nacho Busto, who has made this model, and did a great job, and we're having a real fun time painting it up. Alright, while Hulk is drying here, we're going to take a minute and work on his base. What I'm going to do is add some light brown to it. I've grabbed some honey brown, and basically what I'm wanting to do is just give a little more natural dirt feel to this and to the rocks. I like the natural wood coloring that comes from the Tianse Wood Filament here. This is beautiful filament. I can't recommend it enough. If you ever want to consider making lithophanes, take a look at my Instagram account. I posted a Jason Lives post with a lithophane that I made out of this filament. Absolutely amazing. So what I'm going to do is I need to do a test. His feet are going to go right here and here, so what better place to test out and see if this is going to work the way I want. And yeah, I think that's going to be alright. Basically I'm wanting it to be really thinned out so that it's really just acting as a light acrylic wash, and then we're just going to kind of go over pretty much everything. We'll be coming back over this as well and hitting it with some weathering, and between all of that, a little thicker than I wanted, if that's okay. Just grab some more water and thin it back out. And then if you get too much, or if it gets too watery, grab a paper towel and just dab away at it, or wipe, and you get some of that back off. So I'm like I said, just wanting to get a rough color of this onto here, and after that we'll get to the weathering, and that really brings the realism into it. It's my favorite part of painting, is weathering it. And the biggest reason I think is because when you're weathering it, the entire purpose is to make it look real. And the best way to do that is to add imperfections into it. So, like in the quote from Jeff Goldblum's character in Jurassic Park, even your skin has tiny imperfections. And it's those things that make us look real as versus plastic. If you have a really clean 3D print, you'll notice that it doesn't have the right realism to it, and it's because you don't have enough imperfections in it. And boy howdy, can I put imperfections into things. So I'm gonna take a pause and just literally keep dirtying this up, and then I'll come back. Okay, I think that this looks pretty good. So we're going to let it dry and then take it over and spray it down with some matte enamel, and then we'll be able to weather it up and give Hulk a very, very good looking base here. Okay, so I usually don't use this on my PLA just because it's a little more expensive, and the UV resistance really good for resin casts, but I actually ran out of my regular matte enamel, so this more expensive one it is. Just going to do a little spray on here, and the reason I want matte is above everything else. This is supposed to be dirt, so there's no reason that this would have a glisten or a gloss to it. So I definitely want to lock in the colors, not have them change, but also keep it very dull. So this is going to be good. I'm going to come back to it in probably about 10 minutes. And until then, we'll switch over to getting something else done here. One thing I wanted to point out was that I just have to give big props to Nacho on the model here. I hadn't even noticed before that the pant legs are actually not supposed to be ripped like that. There's supposed to be a small rip here, which I thought was maybe a gouge in the Hulk skin that he was still healing from. But it turns out that no, that was actually supposed to be the only hole. This was a bit of a print fail, but truthfully, I think that it looks such a cool rip in his clothes that I'm just going to go with it. I'm not going to try and bother fixing that up. And the big shout out to Nacho is that he literally designed the pants and left them separate, so you can actually feel like an air bubble in between the pants and the skin underneath. And that's just something I've not seen in any of the models up until now. They've always been a hard mold where the material meets the object and not leaving those as two separate objects. But I really think that it gave for a cool, far more realistic feel and look to the actual clothing. So again, big props to you, man. So what I've got is Purple Rain here, and if you're not familiar with the Hulk, you may have not have realized that he does wear purple shorts. And just a little art tip for you: the reason that he wears purple shorts is because purple is the complementary color to green, and so the clear decision for what's the best color that would be his only clothing that he's going to wear, that would be purple. So just testing this up here, and one of the things that I should be really clear on is by the time we get done with this, the weathering is going to make this really, really dark, and I think that overall he is going to look amazing. But I'm just going to keep adding this purple on, and it's getting a nice base coat on there. Again, I always like to start with the back, just because if something goes awry, it's an easy place to start fixing and is not the primary focus place. So that's why I start with the back. Alright, I'm going to, like I said, keep going from here, and I will check back with you in a few minutes. Okay, so that's where he's sitting right now. I did realize I forgot to share with you at the beginning of this. Just the last shot, my battery had died out. I took some black acrylic paint and thinned it out a little bit, and then just really lightly went over his head with that, and that gave that nice kind of salt and pepper, black gray combination that once it looked like that, I'm like, oh, I think that's good. So we're going to now lock this down with matte enamel everywhere, and that will give us a good baseline. There's still a few things that we'll touch up after that, but then we can really start to weather this guy up, and he'll be getting close. It's exciting. Got our UV resistant clear coat mat, so this is going to be great to just make sure that no matter what, he is not going to have any issues with sunlight or whatnot. Clear, good coating, and helps lock everything in. While Hulk is drying, figured we would go ahead and start working on the base for him. So we've got a combination of the natural wood plus a little bit of the honey brown. Now what we're going to do is actually make this look like real earth. So I've got some Burnt Umber Oil here. This is a water-based oil, and the Winsor & Newton Artisan Group oils are awesome. So I'm just going to take a little bit, and don't want a whole lot on the brush. This is basically just lightly brushing this on, probably a little more than that. And we just want it to get some of the brown color from this burnt umber, and there we go, start streaking it in there. Now if you're getting a little too dry, we can add some water, but at this point I'm not looking to have this too wet. We will do that in some points, but really that gives a complete mud feel, and I'm not looking for complete mud. I'm looking for a little more of just earth tones, and I think that's starting to pull that out really nice. I'm going to go ahead and keep going with this. If you do get too much oil or too much water on there, for instance, like if it gets too soupy like this, what'll happen is it may start to streak or get a little too dark or intense. If you like it, go for it. And if it's too much and you want to pull it back, just grab your paper towel here and wipe some of that off. And you can also just grab some more water, and just with a pure wet brush you can pull some of that back off as well and just start dragging it around. But also remember, you don't want this to be consistently one color, because nothing is consistent, so you want some variability in there, especially with the rocks and the shadows of the rocks. So just play around with it and get to working on the entire base here with some level of the burnt umber, unless it's an area that you want to leave the color it is, and then go for that. And we'll check back in a few minutes. So one technique that I wanted to share while I was working on painting up some of the rocks different colors was this concept of making a mud pool, and it can be applied to mud with the burnt umber or black, or if you were looking for making something bloody, you can use crimson and it would be the same concept. But what I'm doing is just taking a bit of it and dabbing it here, and probably got too much, but that's alright. And then I'm going to just take a little bit of water and put it there, and then let nature do its course. And as I move it around, you can create little streams or rivulets or whatnot, and really get more natural feels in there. If it's drying up, you're not getting enough, just grab a little more water, put it there. You can see it immediately starts to flow back into some other place. You can help it along, and then see how it'll flow from there. And what you can end up with are some very nice effects that would be really hard to try and get on your own just by letting nature manipulate and move it around. And then if you've got still too much, dab some of that off, and now we've got some nice coloring in on this. And as soon as we put just a little water here, it immediately goes back to where it was, because it has that memory of it. And we can work on getting a lot of different variations on color and saturation of the color. So that's all. I just wanted to share that. So I just wanted to take a moment and see how the base would be looking with him on it. We've got a dirty hem up, of course, but I'm really liking how this is going to be looking. So I'm going to go ahead and call the base good. We'll lock in the colors on that one with some matte enamel, and we will start weathering up the Hulk here. Alright, I'm actually going to be using black on here to really get some depth into the base, but I was really just so excited, and as we saw, he looks starting to look really good, but I know he will immediately look so much better when we start to add the burnt umber onto the Hulk himself. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing that here, and I'm going to actually start, rather than on the back, I'm going to start with his feet because that is where it's going to come in contact with this, and you can see it's very, very stark difference between that natural green of his feet with the flat green, I mean, not natural. So no, this is crazy, just overwhelming at the moment, but I also want it to be able to be smudged off unevenly because figure he's been tromping through the grass and mud here. That looks a lot better. I love how it just fell into the creases in his foot here. Move that a little closer so you can see. And definitely on the sides it's got like a stomped up feel. So I'll wipe off a little more on that side, but you're seeing how it's coming along on that. I'm just going to keep going there. Stretch that out over there, and now I'm going to go back to the way we were doing it, which was just a light brushing and kind of pushing in some of these crevices that are naturally on him. Basically, I don't want anything to be that flat green. I want there to be some addition, some pop. Maybe it's just a very light amount of the burnt umber, and in some cases it'll be a very heavy amount of the burnt umber, and those will just make him come alive. So again, I've got a crease up here. I'm going to grab some and really rub it into there, and then especially where the pants meet. Now speaking of the pants, they're pretty grungy too, so let's start adding the burnt umber onto those. And again, definitely work it into the creases. And as always, if you're starting to feel maybe went a little too heavy, you can wipe a little off. And that gives a lot more dimensional feel to it. So, right leg, left leg, I think you see where we're going with this. I'm just going to keep on going. I did want to take a moment and share another technique bit. Some people would look at this and say, you know, I'm planning on gluing the piece down onto the base, so why even bother painting the bottom of his feet? You know, you're never ever going to see them. And while I agree, that is probably true that you'll never see them, the thing is as you start to paint the bottoms, you're going to naturally come up around the sides, and so you're going to actually naturally give some more realistic dirt up onto the sides of his feet that you wouldn't have gotten in a natural way had you tried it just straight on the sides or from the top. So, alright, I wanted to take a pause. At this point, his entire lower half has been hit pretty heavily with the burnt umber, and you know, started a little bit on his back here, but otherwise you can see it is definitely more of a muddied look, like he's been definitely tromping through the dirt and the muck for some amount of time, and probably sat down in the mud puddle at one point or two, or maybe got thrown there. We definitely wanted to make sure we got some of the dirtying up into where his ripped pant leg was. So now that we've got this concept, I'm just going to keep going on the rest for his body, and it'll look a lot like his back here. Again, I just don't want it to be too much of this flat green. Some pieces, sure, but it's got to be a lot of different colors and tones to to really make him seem realistic, and that's what we're shooting for. Alright, so at this point we've got him all covered up with burnt umber, and I have to say I'm really happy with how this has all come out. I've wiped down some of it where it was a little intense, and I'll probably wipe down a little bit more off of his arms here so it's not quite as dirtied up, but still pretty close. And then I'm going to take it over and we'll spray it down with matte enamel. We're now going to take some black oil, water-based oil, and do some additional weathering. I've already started just a little bit, and you can see here I've got the front part of this is now a little bit more black. Not going to go everywhere, just wanting to kind of darken some of this up and just kind of pick some random spots that I want to be darker, especially if it seems deeper. And then one other bit that once we're done giving a nice base on this, I'm going to do some additional flecks, because the black flecks will really help just kind of add to the realism of the whole piece. So I'm just going to keep going like this. Again, not hitting everywhere. We want a lot of variation, because that's what ground looks like. It's pretty varied. So keep going like that. I'll check back in a few minutes. For this next technique, we're going to want some black oil on our handy dandy high-tech palette, and a pretty big thick brush, basically just dapping and getting some of the oil onto the tip of the brush. And then take just a bottle of water and wet your brush down. Now take another brush and simply flick. Now what we have is a whole bunch of little spatters of black everywhere that are just going to naturally kind of give just a more realistic feel to it. Okay, I think we're getting really close on Hulk here. I'm going to basically now do a little more of the weathering, just using the black oil like we just did. Not exactly just. I'm going to use the black oil like we did on the base. I'm not going to do so much the flecking, maybe a little bit on his feet, but right now I just want to give some more depth to some of his lines here. So again, start on the back and just see how this works out here. And kind of working in some of these creases. Especially down the whole pant seam area. So now we just want to minimize some of the bits there and emphasize others. Not really adding a lot, so I'm going to let my brush down a little and freshen up here. But again, I don't want it to be too intense, so back it off a little and then just paint into a seam, see how we like it. And then once we've got an area hit, kind of smooth it out. And then wipe a little of that excess off. So now we're starting to get some deep variations in here, and already it's looking a little cooler and more intense than the right side. So yeah, that's where we'll keep going. Alright, since we're up here, his hair is just looking a little too gray. So let's start going back over this with some of the black oil as well. That's good. That's giving a lot of the salt and pepper feel, but giving a lot more of the true black to his hair. Wanted to dot in the ears there because obviously there's a little bit of a dark spot in our ears where light doesn't get to. Alright, I'm going to get back to where we were and finish up on his back, his arms, his legs, keep going with his pants, etc., etc. I think this guy is ready for his final coat of enamel, and at this point you have to make a decision of what type. I'm thinking that because of the way the Hulk is, I'm going to go with satin. It just seems like he's always got just a sheen of sweat that of course he's always running at super RPM for his body, so it only makes sense that he would constantly be sweating because he's overexerted. So we're gonna go ahead and give a coat of satin to him. Nacho has a nice base for the Hulk here, but I wanted to add a little more bulk to it. So I had this plaque that I had picked up from Michael's back when they were open, and you could go there anytime. And it's been sitting around waiting to be a base for something. I figured out this is close enough, so I took a little bit of that 2-part epoxy that I used earlier and basically just ran it around to clean up the ridge that was between the slight difference in size that this had, but it was really close. So now I'm going to tape off the top here and prime this outer edge, and then I'm going to hit it all with some sandy and rocky texture paint that I've got to really finish this whole thing off. Okay, so we're not looking to be perfect, just wanting to make sure that we don't get any of our already nicely painted stuff hit with too much of our primer or our fake sand. But I want to cover up that green and get it ready for the for that fake sand and rock. I'm going to take this stone accent and then hit it also with this other stone accent between the two. It's going to give a real nice distribution, I think. Okay, it looks like we've got a nice distribution across the whole thing. I can't really tell where one bit starts and the other stops, and that's what I was looking for. So we're going to let this dry, then we'll take the tape off for the reveal of that. Hopefully we did a good enough job on the taping up that we'll be able to mount Hulk and call this good. And here's the reveal. So now I'm going to take our matte enamel and of course spray it all down again. Now this one we're going to have to let dry for quite a while. The that spray stuff of the rock, the fake rock effect, takes quite a bit to dry. I'm going to say a couple of hours to several hours. That's okay, we got time. So what I'm going to do after that dries is take a little bit of burnt umber and black again, and I think we're done, and hit any of these areas where the tape kind of got up so that it really does look like a nice disc sitting on this sandy rocky base. And at that point we will be ready to affix Hulk permanently and call this a completed piece. So while I'm off camera, I took the burnt umber and just lightly went around the edge here to hit the ring and give us a nice delineated break between our ridge and the base. And so now we're going to mount Hulk into his final position. I have a couple of options. I really want this to be solid. I don't want him to ever come off of there. So rather than just a little dab of super glue or something, I'm going a little more heavy duty. Often I'll go with a 5-minute epoxy. This time I'm going with some JB Weld Plastic Bonder. This is great. Actually, it's what I used under this to mount the plastic wood to the or the plastic to the wood base. And so now I'm just going to get a little bit here. We don't need a whole lot. And cap it up. Grab a little mixing stick and mix that together. Now the nice thing about the 5-minute epoxy is that dries in a clear gloss, whereas this is obviously a dark tar black. But I'm not real worried about it. I'm going to try and stay good and keep it right in his footprint area here, and then really cover the stem well. And then I will get some into that other foot area as well. There was another stem there, but my foot peg did not line up perfectly. Again, I think that was just from the shrinkage of the resin, so ended up snapping the base off there, but I'm not concerned about it because we're just gonna cement him in as tight as we can. So now that I've got all this gunk in there, we'll go ahead, make sure I don't have any on my hands, and then get Hulk lined up and set him into place. Okay, we need to give this about half an hour, and then we are going to be set. So there you have it, the Hulk by Nacho Busto, printed in resin and PLA and painted up in acrylics, oils, and some little spray paint effects for the base. I hope you enjoyed the video, and hope you picked up a couple of techniques. If so, follow along on the channel, and I'll be having more come out. Give a shout out, shares, likes, and that type of thing. And for sure, give Nacho a shout out about how much you like his model. That's all for today. Take care.